President announcing a 17% tariff this month on tomatoes from Mexico, ending a trade agreement American farmers claim failed to keep underpriced Mexican imports from flooding the market.
With the tariffs going on right now, we kind of don't know where we're going to be. The United States can't handle the demand. They don't grow enough to supply the United States of America.
Hidden beneath something as ordinary as a tomato lies a story of power, profit, and painful choices. What looks like just another fruit in the produce aisle is now at the center of a collapse, shaking American farmers, squeezing seniors on fixed incomes, and quietly enriching Mexico's agricultural empire. Today, America's tomato collapse isn't just about food. It's about a nation losing control of its own dinner table. It's about rural towns fading away while foreign growers thrive. And it's about the ripple effect every shopper feels when the cost of a single tomato rises by 40, 50, or even 70%. This story is unfolding right now, and the ending will shape not only what you pay at the grocery store, but whether America can feed itself in the years ahead. To understand today's collapse, we have to step back to where the story began. For over a century, tomatoes were a cornerstone of American agriculture. Florida's sandy soils and California's fertile valleys turned the fruit into a powerhouse crop. By the 1960s and 70s, tomatoes were more than food. They were an industry fueling jobs, exports, and a sense of national pride. Tomatoes became cultural icons. They were the base of Heinz ketchup, the star of Pizza Hut and Domino's, the secret behind Campbell's soups and Hunt's sauces. At their peak, American farms were producing over 14 million tons of tomatoes annually, feeding not just the nation, but much of the world. Back then, buying tomatoes grown in Mexico was rare. Imports were minimal, used only when U.S. harvests dipped. The U.S. fed itself and exported the surplus. Farmers earned a living. Towns built around agriculture thrived, and Americans assumed it would always be that way. But food systems rarely collapse overnight. They erode slowly, until one day the cracks can no longer be ignored. The turning point began in the 1990s with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. While it promised cheaper food and stronger trade, it opened the door to a flood of Mexican produce. Tomatoes, grown cheaply with lower labor costs and favorable climates, began entering the U.S. market by the truckload. At first, American farmers thought they could compete, but reality proved harsher. California faced worsening droughts. Florida was battered by hurricanes, labor costs soared, fuel prices climbed, and fertilizer became more expensive. Meanwhile, Mexico offered year-round harvests, lower wages, and government support for expanding exports. By 2024, over 70% of fresh tomatoes consumed in the United States came from Mexico. In just 3 decades, America went from being a tomato superpower to being heavily dependent on imports. For American farmers, the collapse was devastating. Entire fields were abandoned. Processing plants shut down. Rural economies that once relied on tomatoes for survival saw jobs vanish. For consumers, especially seniors living on fixed incomes, the crisis was no less painful. Prices surged and quality often declined. What used to be an affordable staple turned into a luxury for many. And for Mexico, it was the opposite story. Booming exports, rising profits, and new agricultural empires sprouting across Sinaloa and Baja California. America's collapse was Mexico's jackpot. But was this shift a natural result of globalization, or the product of quiet deals, overlooked policies, and powerful corporations that knew exactly what they were doing? The farmer's perspective. For U.S. growers, the collapse feels like betrayal. Many have been in the tomato business for 3 or 4 generations. They invested in equipment, irrigation, and land, believing the industry would remain stable. But year after year, imports undercut them. Some accuse Mexico of using unfair subsidies. Others point fingers at U.S. policymakers for failing to defend domestic agriculture. Today, countless farmers have switched to less labor-intensive crops or left agriculture entirely. The senior's perspective. For seniors on Social Security, the collapse isn't abstract, it's personal. In communities from Ohio to Arizona, elderly shoppers talk about skipping fresh produce, cutting back on meals, or settling for canned goods instead of fresh tomatoes. Inflation has already strained fixed incomes. Add rising produce prices, and the once simple joy of a tomato sandwich now feels out of reach for many. The Mexican grower's perspective. South of the border, the story is completely different. Farmers in Mexico see the tomato boom as a path to prosperity. Export hubs near the U.S. border run day and night, shipping truckloads into Texas, Arizona, and California. The industry employs hundreds of thousands, from field laborers to logistics managers. To them, America's struggles are not a collapse, but an opportunity, a chance to seize global market share and secure wealth for future generations. The corporate perspective. Meanwhile, U.S. food corporations, supermarkets, fast food giants, and distributors rarely complain. Imports allow them to keep shelves stocked year-round. Even if prices climb, their margins remain intact. In fact, many argue they benefit from globalization. Why depend on water-starved California fields when Mexican farms can produce tomatoes more cheaply all year long? But in this arrangement, someone always pays the hidden cost, and it's rarely the corporations. The tomato collapse isn't just a U.S. story. It's part of a larger global shift. As climate change intensifies, nations are rethinking food security. Europe has faced crop failures from heat waves. Asia has battled floods and droughts. In this fragile landscape, a country losing control of its own food supply is more than a minor trade adjustment. It's a warning sign. When America turns to Mexico for the majority of its tomatoes, it becomes vulnerable to price shocks, supply chain disruptions, and political tension. If Mexico decides to restrict exports, or if climate disasters hit their growing regions, American shelves could empty overnight. Globally, other countries are watching. Brazil, Spain, and Morocco see the power of agricultural exports to reshape international trade. Food is not just about meals, it's about leverage. In the future, the nation that controls food exports may hold more power than the one with the biggest army. So here's the haunting question. If America can't protect something as basic as a tomato, what happens when the stakes rise to wheat, rice, or even drinking water? Every layer of this story leads to deeper questions. Who benefits when an industry collapses? Who profits when seniors can't afford healthy food? And who decides whether a nation feeds itself or surrenders that control to another? The road forward is uncertain, but two paths stand out. Path 1. Rebuilding. Some experts argue America can fight back. Technology may be the weapon. Greenhouses, hydroponics, and vertical farms capable of producing year-round harvests with minimal water. Entrepreneurs in states like Arizona and Colorado are already experimenting with indoor farms that could cut imports dramatically. If scaled up, these could restore food independence and even create new industries. Path 2. Deeper dependence. But if policies remain unchanged and investment lags, the opposite could happen. America may rely even more heavily on foreign food. Mexico would strengthen its grip on the U.S. market, and prices would rise further with every drought, flood, or border disruption. In this scenario, control of the American dinner table would no longer rest in American hands. Which future unfolds depends on decisions being made right now, in boardrooms, in Congress, and in farms both north and south of the border. The tomato collapse is not just about farmers or shoppers. It's about the bigger story of control. Who grows the food, who sets the price, and who holds the power when a nation can no longer feed itself. Today, it's tomatoes. Tomorrow, it could be wheat, corn, or water itself. The question that lingers is this: will America reclaim its food independence? Or will it accept a future where even the simplest meal depends on the choices of another nation? Because in the end, food is not just food. It is survival, and survival cannot be outsourced forever.